Race and Wrongdoing in the United Kingdom. From Wikipedia, the free reference book. Leap to root, jump to look. This article has various issues. If it's not too much trouble, help improve it or examine these issues on the discussion page. Figure out how and when to eliminate these format messages. This article should be refreshed. January 2021. This article might be unequal toward specific perspectives. November 2010. Race. Race, science. Race, arrangement. Hereditary qualities and contrasts. Race and hereditary qualities. Human hereditary variety. Society. Chronicled ideas. Scriptural phrasing for race. Race and identity. In Brazil. In the United States. Prejudice. In the United States. Logical prejudice. Racial imbalance in the U.S. Racial pay hole in the U.S. Racial profiling. Racial predisposition in criminal news. Race and society. Wrongdoing. In the United Kingdom, in the United States. Well-being. In the United States. Insight. History of. Sports. Computer games. Related subjects. Ethnic gathering. Selective breeding. Hereditary qualities. Human advancement. List. Class. Vet. The connection among race and wrongdoing in the United Kingdom is the subject of scholastic investigations, government studies, media inclusion, and public concern. Under the Criminal Justice Act 1991, Area 95, the public authority gathers yearly measurements dependent on race and crime. 1, 2, N1. These measurements have featured contrasts in paces of wrongdoing between racial gatherings, and a few observers have proposed social clarifications for these distinctions. Substance. 1. History. 2. Statistics. 2.1 England and Wales wrongdoing measurements. 2.2 Stop and look. 2.3 Racist wrongdoings. 3 Race and wrongdoing in London. 4 Media. 5 Explanations. 6 C2. 7 Notes. 8 References. 9 Sources. 10 External connections. History. Theft, drug use, and posse savagery have been related with individuals of color since the 1960s. 4. The Metropolitan Police has been blamed for institutional bigotry on various events. One model regularly referred to is the Mangrove Nine, a gathering in the long run absolved in 1970. In 1995, the London Metropolitan Police Chief Paul Condon said that most of burglaries in London were perpetrated by dark people. 5. Operation Trident was set up in March 1998 by the Metropolitan Police to examine weapon wrongdoing in London's African American community after dark-on-dark shootings in Lambeth and Brent. 6. In 2003, Lee Jasper, Senior Policy Advisor on Equalities to the London Civic Chairman, said medications and firearm wrongdoing were the greatest danger to the African American population since its appearance here. 7. In 2007, Executive Tony Blair ascribed a progression of murders submitted by individuals of color to a proclivity for group culture. The African American population should be assembled in upbraiding of this pack culture that is slaughtering honest youthful dark children. In any case, we will not stop this by imagining it isn't youthful dark children doing it. 8. Some from the African American population condemned his remarks. 9. Gang inclusion as a rule is supposed to be a preceding problem. 10. African Caribbean individuals are over-addressed in fierce crimes. 11. Some media feature writers have contended that the issue of individuals of color and wrongdoing is minimized, because of dread of allegations of racism. 12. 13. The London Metropolitan Police Service is one of only a handful few police powers which has gathered measurements on assault. Producer Sorius Samura ordered 29 such occurrences including youngsters from January 2006 to March 2009, and found that, of 92 individuals sentenced, 66 were dark or blended race. Samura said he thought that it was difficult to disregard the way that a particularly high extent were submitted by dark and blended race youthful men. 14. Measurements. Britain and Wales wrongdoing measurements. In June 2007, the Home Affairs Select Committee distributed a report on youthful individuals of color and the criminal equity arrangement of England and Wales. It said that youthful individuals of color were over-addressed at all phases of the criminal equity system. 15. The Commission for Racial Equality and Youth Noble Cause invited the report. 16. 17. Service of justice figures with respect to race and the criminal equity framework in 2018 are appeared in the table below. 18. White, Black, Asian, Mixed, Chinese or other. Populace 2018, 86.0%, 3.3%, 6.8%, 2.2%, 1.7%. Stops and searches under Police and Criminal Evidence Act 59%, 22%, 13%, 4%, 2%. Captures 2018 78%, 10%, 7%, 3%, 2%. Jail population 73%, 13%, 8%, 5%, 1%. Stop and searches. Cops have the ability to pause and look through people under a scope of enactment. Insights have reliably shown that individuals of color are lopsidedly bound to be liable to stop and searches. 19. In 2008-09 in England and Wales, more individuals of color were halted and looked under Section 1 of the Police and Criminal Evidence Act per head of populace than some other ethnicity. 20. And individuals of color were multiple times bound to be halted and looked than whites. 21. Individuals of color were the subject of 14.8% of all stop and searches, contrasted with 7.6% of captures and 6.7% of cautions. 22. The lopsided number of stop and searches is part of the way represented by the way that 54% of the dark populace in England and Wales live in London, where 40.2% of London's populace is either Asian, dark, blended or other in ethnicity. 23. Leaving almost 59% of London's populace is white, showing how unbalanced the pace of pause and search is in London. Note that stop and searches are more normal for all nationalities around there. In some police power regions, there were more stop and searches per head of populace of whites than of individuals of color. From 2004-05 to 2008-09, there was an increment in the quantity of stop and searches of individuals of color comparative with whites. 21. By 2016-2017, it was recorded that a pause and search was 8.4 occasions is prone to happen for an individual of color contrasted with a white individual. Essentially, the pace of stop and searches in blended nationality and Asian individuals was more than twice as likely, when contrasted and that of an individual with a white ethnicity. 24. More as of late, between April 2019 and March 2020, the utilization of pause and search powers under Section 60 Criminal Justice and Public Order Act happened multiple times, which was an increment of 19% from the year prior. 25. Stop and searches can likewise be directed under Section 60 of the Criminal Justice and Public Order Act 1994. These pursuits are intended to manage the danger of savagery. Near investigation by scientists at the London School of Economics and the Open Society Justice Initiative has shown that, in England and Wales in 2008-09, individuals of colour were multiple times bound to be halted and looked than whites. Asian individuals were 6.3 occasions bound to be halted and looked than whites. The OSI analysts expressed that these figures featured that Britain had the most extensive race hole in stop and searches that they had revealed internationally. 26. Ben Bowling, an educator of criminal equity at King's College London, remarked on the investigation, expressing, "The police are utilising a force that was just at any point intended to be utilised in excellent conditions and needs successful shields. This leaves space for expanded generalising, which is probably going to distance those networks which are most affected." 26. There is solid proof that, when halted and looked, individuals of colour are not any more likely than whites to be captured, recommending that they are excessively targeted. 27. Bigoted violations. In 2005-06, there were 6,439 recorded bigoted violations in Scotland. 1,543 casualties were of Pakistani inception, while more than 1,000 were classed as white British. 28. The British Crime Survey uncovers that in 2004, 87,000 individuals from dark or minority ethnic networks said they had been a casualty of a racially persuaded wrongdoing. They had endured 49,000 rough assaults, with 4,000 being injured. Simultaneously, 92,000 whites said they had likewise fallen casualty of a racially spurred wrongdoing. The quantity of savage assaults against whites arrived at 77,000, while the quantity of whites who detailed being injured was multiple times the quantity of dark and minority ethnic casualties at 20,000, 29. Race and wrongdoing in London. See likewise, Crime in London. An Enemy of Blade wrongdoing exhibit in Wood Green, North London, October 2019. Figures from the Office for National Statistics showed that in 2007 an expected 10.6% of London's populace of 7,556,900 were black. 30. Evidence shows that the dark populace in London precincts increments with the degree of hardship, and that the degree of wrongdoing likewise increments with hardship, with the end goal that obviously identity, hardship, exploitation and culpable are intently and complicatedly between related. 31. In June 2010, through a Freedom of Information Act demand, the Sunday Telegraph acquired insights on allegations of wrongdoing separated by race from the Metropolitan Police Service. N2. The figures showed that most of guys who were blamed for brutal violations in 2009-2010 were dark. Of the recorded 18,091 such allegations against guys, 54% blamed for road violations were dark, for burglary, 58%, and for firearm wrongdoings, 67%. 32. Road violations incorporate muggings, attack with expectation to burglarize, and grabbing property. In 2010, dark guys represented 29% of the male survivors of weapon wrongdoing and 24% of the male casualties of blade crime. 32. Between April 2005 and January 2006, figures from the Metropolitan Police Service showed that individuals of color represented 46% of vehicle wrongdoing captures produced via programmed number plate acknowledgement cameras. 33. Media. Youngsters, especially youthful individuals of color, are ordinarily generalized as participating in criminal behavior. 34. Past exploration shows that the media distorts the image of wrongdoing and that accounts including fierce and sexual offenses are over-announced past the authority statistics. 35. For instance, the worries over robbing during the 1970s were canted around youthful African Caribbean. Please subscribe to my channel for more videos like this, click the like button, hit the notification button and comment below if any suggestions.